Hey, how's it going? I'm Nick, and I'm your host on the Echo Academy podcast, a podcast dedicated to uncovering helpful tools and strategies that help make your quality of life at work better. On today's show, we talk about how to handle the challenges that come with searching for a job. My guests today, yes, we have more than one, is Emily Draycott-Jones and Fay Welch. Emily is a former HR director who's worked across multiple industries and managed human resources in 6 continents. Since May 2019, she's spent some time enjoying a so called break, studying at both the London School of Economics and Singapore Management University while searching for her next role. Emily also set up her own consultancy business and consults on HR best practices as well as provides executive coaching and mentoring. Emily approaches the topic of resilience as an experienced HR professional who's run large scale retrenchment exercises globally. Next, we have Fay Welch. Fay is a director at Elliott Scott HR, a specialist HR recruitment firm. Interestingly, Fay is also a qualified criminal solicitor, but has spent the last 15 years in recruitment and now focuses on senior HR positions in the commercial sector. If you'd like to find out more about both of them, both Emily and Fay, and this episode as well, you can go to echo.academy/Emily and Fay. That's ekho.academy/EMILYANDFAY. I don't think I could have found two more experienced people to discuss this topic with me, so without much further ado, here's my conversation with Emily and Fay. As well. I suppose a good place to start is, in terms of job searching, I mean, when we're made redundant, sometimes we don't always have that, we don't see it coming. And what is a good way to really get in that right frame of mind when, let's say, we get let go or, we've been made redundant? What is a good way for us to really think about or just recalibrate so that we're ready to, get back out there and find what's best for us?
I'll start, shall I, Faye? Being the professional job searcher that I am, and going through many redundancies, I think the days of a job for life are pretty much been and gone, unless you're going into a particular vocation or you want to be an entrepreneur. I think there's no such thing as job security anymore. I hate to be pessimistic. So in some respects, you always need to be prepared. You always need an updated CV. You always need an updated social media profile. Constantly asking for recommendations on LinkedIn. Ensuring that your profile is up to date, that you're connecting with people when you meet with them, because more often than not, your future job leads are going to come through your network, not, unfortunately, Faye, always through recruiters, I hate to say. And so you just always need to be prepared. You always need it in the back of your mind. And even if you're not actively job searching, even if you've not been made redundant or been the victim of a restructuring, having that network and having an up-to-date profile could actually get you headhunted. So don't necessarily just see it as, oh, it means I'm not committed to my current role, but you never know, and you never know when you might be looking. So it's always good to kind of have your profile up to date.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I guess from my side, I often come into the process after the redundancy has happened.
Right.
And so I often end up speaking with people that have maybe had a bit of a shock or, are coming to terms with, sometimes after a long tenure with a company as well, to finding themselves out in the workforce when they weren't necessarily planning on that. I think it's a really individual thing, and I think people cope with it very differently. I've seen examples of people who have been made redundant and the next day their CV's updated and they're out on the job hunt and making calls and meeting people. I've seen people who have thought, you know what, great chance to take a break, and have flown off for 3 months and been somewhere excited and travelled the world. I tend to think maybe somewhere in the middle is a good way to think about things. I think mentally, it's not taking it personally. In today's age, it's not about you. It's really not. It's about the economy. It's about someone in an office somewhere else who probably doesn't even know you that well, who's come to this decision, usually for a financial reason. So I think that's the main thing. I think, all of us are very guilty of blaming ourselves for these things. And, in this day and age, it's really not about the individual. The next thing after that is to maybe give yourself a bit of a break, take some time to step away and readjust before you work on your CV, or if you have it ready, if you're fully prepared, and just think about what you want next and what you're looking for, and take that time to really mentally prepare yourself for what's to come, because you've already been through something that's quite difficult, and job seeking is not easy. So it's, again, mentally preparing yourself, and I think having that toughness to be ready for what's to come. I think then, it is about, exactly as Emily said, having a network. Don't be afraid to reach out to people, even if you haven't spoken to them for a while, that former colleagues, people that you've worked with, people that have met you from other countries, because again, I wish I could say that every candidate I met I placed. I'd probably have given up working by now if that was the case, but I think we crunched the numbers, and on average it's about, most recruiters only place about 2 to 3% of the people they meet.
Wow.
Right, if you think about that, compared to the number of people we actually meet, it's not a lot. So you do need to, as I've always said, you have to take ownership of your job search. It's your job search. It's not the recruiter's job search. It's not the company you're applying to's job search. It's yours. So I think taking ownership of that, and making sure that you ask for support and ask people for, to meet for a coffee and ask them their advice, and don't be afraid to sort of say, I'm actively looking right now. And I think a lot of people maybe don't want to put that out there, but I think that's really important. And one of the things I do love about Singapore is that everyone here is ready for a coffee.
That's true.
I mean, even to meet recruiters, everyone's ready to sit down and have a glass of wine or a coffee and connect. And Singapore's really good for that. So don't be afraid to do it. Emily and I have talked in the past about networking events, and how, even as a recruiter, they're not always the most comfortable environment. And it is something that you have to get used to. And I think going along and meeting people, that's the way to kind of do that and build that out for yourself. And I think just not being too hard on yourself. I think we're all so quick to blame ourselves and judge ourselves. And I think, and I know we could probably talk about this later, but as well, when you have interviews and people come out and they analyze themselves and I could have done this better. And I think it's just about being kind to ourselves and remembering that everyone's struggling with things. Everyone's, no one finds job searching easy. No one enjoys going for job interviews. Everyone struggles with that. So just be good to yourself when it comes to those things.
And it's interesting because you brought up a few points, and I want to focus on one of the things you actually said earlier, which was, mentally preparing yourself. What does that look like?
I think, the people I've seen do it, and I think, in my opinion, sort of managed it quite well, have been quite structured. So they've got up at the same time they would have done if they were going out to work. They've had a plan. For me, I write a plan before I leave every night of what I'm going to do the next day. And I think people having that, whether it's on an Excel sheet, if you prefer to write things out, but just having that plan ahead of you, people you're going to meet for coffee, people that you're going to connect with or reconnect with, and having that in your mindset. I think keeping yourself busy is also important, and making, I think, if you feel that you're getting somewhere, whether that's by the number of people you're connecting with and meeting, the conversations you're having, the recruiters you're going out to speak with. Right. So I think that's part of, I think for me, being organised and being able to kind of plan your day in advance and know what you're doing. And, you might decide, today I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to go off and go to the gym or things like that. But I think having that mental preparation, and then actually having things to do each day to that you can see those steps leading to the new job that you're looking for.
Just to add on, would you also recommend metrics or to incorporate that, when you're, let's say you create a schedule, do you tell yourselves, I'm going to meet 10 people today? Is that how you should be thinking about it? Or?
So I have I can't wait to go back to some of the points that Fay's already raised. But, your specific question about metrics, yes, I think, we all need to feel that we're making some progress. So I think, in terms of metrics, it's identifying what are the good recruiters in your workspace or your industry, and kind of going through and saying to myself, right, I'm going to connect with all of them every week, right? So it's, even if it's having the initial coffee, then it's making sure you're checking their websites, connecting with them to say, oh, that job looks interesting, or just making sure you've got those touch points with the key recruiters on a regular basis. I think the other metric that you can put in place for yourself is the number of new connections that you make. So personally, I have a kind of self-declared metric of trying to attend 2 events every week. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be a networking event or a function. It could literally be somebody invites you for coffee somewhere, or saying yes twice, basically. Right. And then throughout the week, what I try to do is find at least 2 people that I can help. So, I try to face all of my networking with a sense of generosity, rather than trying to constantly be the job searcher or the person with a consultancy looking for the next deal, and if I go out there with generosity, I kind of just hope that the world will give me a little bit of reciprocity, and it'll come back on me. But going to some of the earlier points, I think, Fay, you made a really great point about there being no shame in being made redundant. I think there's no reason to hide away. I mean, one of the other things I do is I run a network for breadwinning expat women. And obviously, so being made redundant has a double whammy effect on me, because It not only affects me, it's that having to go home and say to my husband, hey, here we go again, babe, and, and to my family who, I relocated my family, and I took my children away from their grandparents. And then for the job to fall through, there could be a sense of shame. So in terms of mentally preparing yourself, it's just, just remembering, like Fay says, that it's not about you. It's about some terrible person like me in my HR career who sat in a room and looked at various metrics and just made a decision that unfortunately you're the one that's got to hit the road. And HR people don't enjoy making people redundant. Managers don't enjoy losing people from their teams. There are things that you can ask for. So it makes a lot of sense to ask, employers if you can go on gardening leave so that you've got some employed time so that you can start your job search before the money stops coming in. Right. You can also ask employers for outplacement support, or maybe some counseling or coaching. There's also quite often through your employer's medical insurance, or maybe EAP, which is an employee assistance program, you can often get counseling or coaching sessions. And you know what? Even just asking people for help, like Fay was saying, everybody out there has been unemployed at some point or being made redundant. Right. There is no shame in going onto your social network and just saying, guys, I've just been made redundant for the first time. Has anybody got any great tips? Putting it out there, what you're looking for. Can anybody connect me with people that might be useful in my industry, or that might be looking for somebody like me? Studying as well, going back to our earlier point about how do you get yourself mentally prepared, have interesting things to talk about at interview. If you've been in the most mundane, boring job that you've hated for the last 18 months or 2 years, you're not going to be a very interesting candidate when you go to interview. So take a night class, have a hobby, speak on a podcast. Nick could love to have more people on his podcast. But do these interesting things so that when you're a candidate and people are saying, oh, so what have you been doing with your free time? You've actually got interesting stuff to tell them, and you've not just been sat at home feeling sorry for yourself. Now, going on to that point, Fay said earlier about having a bit of structure, getting up the same time every day, and making sure that you've got some structure and focus. I'm the exact opposite. The exact opposite. Maybe this shows the character differences between the HR person and the recruiter. I don't know. But, I have mentally prepared myself for the days of self-pity. right? Where you've had those days where maybe you've had a rejection, or one of my consultancy projects hasn't been, approved, or I've gone for a job interview and got ghosted, or, you have to prepare yourself for all of this stuff. So I've allowed myself self-pity days. And they are the days when I stay in my pajamas and I eat junk food and I order Food Panda. Sorry, Deliveroo. But I order Food Panda for my lunch, and I just have a day of misery. And then, the kids come home from school and I pick myself up again and go, okay, I've done my wallowing, and now I'm going to be a mum, and I'm going to have a nice evening with my family, and then tomorrow I'll get back on it. Right. And allowing yourself that, and preparing yourself for, ultimately, it's a grieving cycle. You're going through this grieving process of having been made redundant and going through this rejection, and every rejection feels like, another stamp on your grave. Allowing yourself to feel miserable, I think, actually really helps me come out the other end. Right. Because if I know I'm going to be miserable, then it doesn't feel that bad when I am. And if you schedule it in your diary to say, right, I'm going to have a day of self-pity watching Netflix, then actually you can then enjoy it rather than feeling guilty for it. So I have a slightly different take on it to you, Fay, but that's how I get through day by day.
But Emily, if I could just probe a little further on this, because I suppose every one of us, excuse me, we're unique in the way we deal with difficulties like that. But I would think, especially for someone like me, to allow myself that day of self-pity, I don't know, I'm not sure I would know how to get out of that, right? Because that one day could easily last 2 days and then a week, and before you know it, you've run out of money, and you're just trying to find a job regardless of whether you like it or not. I mean, your personal experience, what does it take for you to snap out of it and just,
So having the stuff in the diary, I think, helps. So I have, whether it's networking events or lunch with friends or catch up with recruiters, I make sure they are there in the diary. I think for me, I like to squash all my meetings into periods of time. So maybe on a Monday, I'll have a really busy day with 2 or 3, catch-ups with recruiters, a couple of clients, maybe a little bit work in the afternoon if I've got a consultancy job going. But then maybe Tuesday, I'm going to have a day at home, wallow in self-pity, and then have dinner with the kids. But then make sure I've got something on the diary for Wednesday morning, whether it's something to look forward to, whether it's meeting a friend for lunch, a personal trainer coming, although that's not particularly enjoyable and I don't look forward to it. But, having a personal trainer meeting or deciding I'm going for a walk and sticking it in the diary, because then my day of self-pity can only last for one day. Right. What I would find difficult is having to be the happy, sparky, charismatic person that you're expected to be when you're interviewing. I would actually find that difficult to maintain 5 days a week, especially when, for myself, I've got 2 small children. The weekends are jam-packed for me as well. I can't have my duvet days at the weekend. In actual fact, it's slightly harder because the kids are home. Right. So for me, I find it easier to have my duvet days during the week, squash all my meetings into the other days, and keep myself motivated. And then at the weekend, I can actually focus on, being part of my family rather than worrying about a meeting, right. The next day. I've kind of already done that.
Okay. So in a way, just making sure your off days are not open-ended, and to make sure you plans.
Definitely. You've got to have plans in the diary. There are certain things. We're very fortunate here in Singapore. There's loads of events. WeWork run them. Eventbrite is a great place to find networking events, free events. If you're Singaporean or if you're a PR like myself, there's great funding available to attend courses. So I'm actually attending a course at SMU at the moment. Wow, okay. Which is quite heavily subsidized by the Singaporean government. Thank you very much. But having these things in the diary, I'm doing 3 days next week. I've got another day booked in November, and these things come around really quickly. You might book something for 6 weeks time, but you'd be amazing how quickly that 6 weeks comes up. And these events on Eventbrite, they do have limited places sometimes, and so it is good to pre-plan.
Right.
You can always drop out later if it's a free place, but getting those things in the diary so that you're not just suddenly finding yourself with the week ahead of you with absolutely nothing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree a lot with what Emily said, and I think it goes back to it being a really individual thing. Like you said, you need those days, and I think there are some people that would need those days and some people that don't. And just talking to you, but just listening to you both, it's really obvious that you'd probably both go about it slightly differently. And again, I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I think the main thing is, as I said, as long as you find it manageable. And again, there are extremes where people wallow for all week, or they make themselves so busy that they find themselves burning out. You do need to take time for yourself, and I think all of us have different levels of what we can and can't do.
Right.
And again, it goes back to what I said about being kind to yourself, being true to yourself, and what you need to do a lot of the time, and you know how much you're comfortable doing, and how and if you do need a day to yourself, when you need to take that.
Right.
And again, I think, like I said before, it's just not being too hard on yourself, and not being afraid to ask for help if you are struggling in some way as well.
Well, then perhaps we can have an example then. Say I've just lost my job, I've been made redundant. Talk me through this entire process of Nicholas has just lost his job to Nicholas has found a new job. And I'm not looking for like solutions or answers, but just some things that will help me, give me an idea of where to start. How do I know if I'm making progress?
Yeah.
And what do I do if things are not going well? Stuff like that.
Yeah. I think, like we said, tracking the things and planning the things you're going to do. Like I said, at the beginning, if you're completely in shock and you need a few days just to get your head around what's happened. And, Emily made a great point about not being afraid to ask your company for help. There's some great outplacement services, and, a lot of the advice I'll give now, they will give you as well. But again, it comes down to having a plan and deciding what you want to go, and thinking, okay, well, this job hasn't worked out. Is this the job I want next, or do I want something slightly different, or what kind of company? And just having a real think and looking inside yourself and thinking, what do I want to do next? And then I think, again, getting prepared practically, spending some time on your CV. I think it's always really helpful to ask a friend to read it, and then they'll always think more of you, Willie, than you do yourself. And they will often be like, well, why haven't you put this? And, they can give you some advice about how to present yourself, because I think a lot of us naturally aren't great at selling ourselves. So getting other people to kind of maybe help with that, not being afraid to ask friends. A lot of friends ask me about LinkedIn and how I use it, and I'm always happy to give people advice as how they should update their profiles. Not that I'm an expert in that, but just that how, if they are trying to maybe get a bit more attention to their profile for whatever reason, but especially if it's a job search, things that they can do, with regards to CV, preparing that, making sure it's not too long but not too short, finding that balance. And then I think a lot of it is about going out and connecting with people, connecting with your network, and then, booking those appointments, getting that information, asking people for help. You will know someone who was made redundant, and asking them about their journey and what they found useful, and what they didn't find useful, and how they plan their day. So I just think it really is about just constantly getting out there. And, Emily will message me, and we'll often catch up for a coffee. And it's really just about finding those people that you connect with. And I think also you may go for a coffee with someone and you're not feeling it, and for whatever reason the conversation doesn't flow, and you're thinking, I don't seem to be able to help them, or, are they going to be able to help me? You don't have to stay in touch with everyone, but just trying to find people that you feel that you connect with, and that, you might have similar interests or things like that you can then kind of continue to have those conversations, and hopefully they will have bought into you like you've bought into them, and that will lead to something further on, for sure.
I love and hate the question that you asked, Nicholas, both at the same time. So I think the first thing, here I am, I'm Nicholas, I'm sat in the room and somebody's just told me I'm about to be made redundant. The first thing I would do is ask my company what they're going to do to help me. So, are you in a situation where you will be placed immediately on gardening leave? Are you leaving immediately? Have you got a notice period? Do you have to work? Do they have an employee assistance program? Is there going to be some counseling? I would also find out if you're the only person being made redundant or whether there's a group of you, because actually one of the things that my recent company did, there was a whole tranche of us that left at the same time. We set up a little WhatsApp group and we sent each other information about jobs that were on the market, or just touching base for lunch every now and again with somebody else that's not working, because that's one of the problems when you're not working and all your friends are, you got nobody to kind of meet up with and hang out with between meetings. Right. So that's the first thing I would do. I would ask the company what they're going to do to help me. I would then, you can even ask your HR person, and a lot of people, the most recent round of redundancies I handled, a lot of employees asked me if I'd look at their CV for them. There's no reason why you can't ask your current company's HR person to look at your CV. Do they know any other companies? HR people like to hang out with HR people. Do they know any other people in the HR world, or can they recommend any recruiters that might be hiring at the moment? So use your current people. I think then the same with your boss, right? You're going to have a current manager. They are most likely to have connections within the network, within the industry. So again, ask your current manager, is there anybody that you can connect me with? I was made redundant, I wasn't fired, so are there any companies or people that you'd be happy to recommend me to? So I think they're the things you need in your mind on your first day. I think then, go home mentally preparing yourself. Then you start on your CV and your LinkedIn profile. So yes, like Faye said, you can ask people to have a look at it, but it's things like making sure you get some recent LinkedIn recommendations. Make sure that you're commenting on interesting posts and sharing interesting posts. Don't waste your news feed on likes. Right? Because if somebody is looking at you seriously and they want to know a little bit about you, they want to know what your opinions are. They don't want to know what you like or dislike or find really interesting. So make a comment, because that way you can demonstrate, your knowledge and your preferences. Once you've got your LinkedIn profile up to date, make sure you turn the I'm searching for a job on. The number of people that don't have that turned on. And it auto turns off after a certain amount of time. So if you think it's on, you need to check it's still on. I don't know what the time scale is, Faye, whether you know, but it definitely turns itself off after a certain amount of time. Right. So make sure that's turned on, and then post on LinkedIn. Put on LinkedIn or your social media or your Facebook, if you have work connections on Facebook or Instagram or whatever other trendies are using these days. I'm terrible. I'm still old fashioned. But post on there. Unfortunately, I've just been made redundant. This is what I'm looking for. Can anybody connect me with people? There is no shame in doing that. And I've seen people have great success doing that. You also need to make sure that on LinkedIn, your title is also changed. So just under your name, I would also have a tagline on there, currently seeking opportunities in the X industry, because that's what people see when you come up on searches. So again, there's some immediate things you can do. Here in Singapore, get yourself booked onto some courses. There's some great financial support from the government, Eventbrite, networking events. Fill your diary for the next couple of months with an event every week, going to information sessions. So even if you can't necessarily afford to do an MBA or an EMBA, quite often universities hold information sessions. Those information sessions are free, and they're going to be full of people interested in doing an EMBA or an MBA. So go to them. Right? So that's another thing you can do that's completely free, and you'll meet some really interesting people. Make sure you've got business cards. It's Singapore. Right. Even if you're going and just asking a friend to print out 100 personal business cards with your name and your telephone number, because the number of people I've met that have said, oh, this is my old business card from my old job and I'm crossing it out and this is my new number. Don't do that. It's not cool. Get yourself some personal business cards. I've got some lovely ones, and it means that you can be nice and creative with your business card rather than sticking to the ugly corporate ones, and it's dirt cheap. You can get them for, you know, $10 or something for a pack. So get yourself some business cards. This is Singapore.
So there's something that both of you mentioned that I really want to get into, because I I wouldn't say I'm very good at networking events. I mean, in fact, I would just say I'm terrible if I'm being honest. And also like I really don't know how to start the small talk and stuff like that. What advice would you give for people who want to put themselves out there and who's willing to take the risk to go to networking events? Like, how do we start, especially if we are alone?
First of all, I would say you're not taking a risk. I've never been to a networking event or seen anyone at a networking event react negatively to anyone trying to network with them.
Okay.
We all know why we're there. You know, everyone knows that we're going to these events to network.
Right.
Whatever your reasons are, if it's because you're looking for a job, if it's you're trying to build your network. So I would think don't build it up in your mind as this big thing. You know, it can be difficult walking into a room full of strangers. You know, even after all these years, I still sometimes, you know, you do have to put your best foot forward in the sense you know, try not to be tired when you go, have some energy about you.
Yeah.
And I think Emily said earlier, have something interesting to talk about. You know, for me, because of what I do, I talk to people all the time, so I have information with regards to that. I've been telling everyone recently who I've met, I'm going on a podcast for the first time, and you wouldn't believe the reaction that gets. And it's great because immediately people connect with you and they're like, oh, and I'm like, you know, and I'm a bit nervous about it. I've never done one before. And that leads to, you know, that makes you human. It makes you real. I think also not going with the attitude of I must get something out of this. And Emily had mentioned it to me before, and I love her take on, you know, trying to meet at least 2 people she can help. Right. And then, you know, looking on the view that the universe will then hopefully, you know, reciprocate. I think that's wonderful. And I think, yeah, just not being afraid, and don't be afraid to walk up to a group of people and introduce yourself. Everyone's expecting it. Everyone's doing the same. Right. And you'll always walk into a networking event and someone will be standing on their own. So you can always go and speak to them and they'll probably be just as relieved that you're talking to them as they are to you. Also, maybe try and pick things that you are genuinely interested in. You know, some of the best networking events that I've been to and that I've thoroughly enjoyed has been because it's a topic that really resonates with me. Right. So I automatically have an opinion about it. It doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be the most educated opinion. It just needs to be an opinion that you're willing to share with other people. And I think, you know, those are just a couple of things I would say. And then also for me as well, going to networking events where I might know one of the speakers. So I did that recently and that was really great. Emily was speaking at an event and I attended. I didn't know anyone else there, but it was, you know, it was a friendly face and it was also nice to be able to go and support her. Yeah. And then that's how we met. Yeah. So I think, you know, just, you know, you don't have to go to every event out there. So I'd say probably pick something you're interested in, maybe somewhere where you know there'll be people that you might already know. Yeah. I'm reluctant to say often take a friend, because what ends up happening is you end up talking to your friend all night.
That's what I guessed.
Yeah, and then you also aren't being perhaps as open to other people approaching you. So although it's really tempting to take your safety blanket and go with your mate, I sometimes think actually you're better off not doing that, because I think you'll talk to more people if you are on your own, and people will be more inclined to approach you if you're not in a, you know, with a gaggle of friends who have, you know, all know each other and have inside jokes.
Yeah, and just to add on, I mean, because I've been to networking events with a group of people, and I always see that one person who's come individually, and I just the absolute admiration for this person, because you can tell they are nervous, and but they're just willing to put themselves out there. However, how do we actually start those conversations? You know, do you guys have any advice on that?
I'm often just for going up and a handshake and hi, I'm Fay. Nice to meet you.
As simple as that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and what made you decide to come to this discussion on X and Y? Is it something, you know, for your work? And then before you know it, I generally find that the conversation starts to flow. It might not flow for very long, but you know, there are enough people around that you can keep moving and talking to people. I think it's just taking that one step and having that one conversation. But I've always found people to be so happy to reciprocate and talk back.
So I have to admit, I started out on my kind of my most recent break from work. I'm going to call it a break from work. I'm not unemployed. I'm taking a break from work. I started it loathing going to networking events. And I remember one of our first chats, and, you know, I was telling you about some awful events I'd been to, and they were excruciatingly painful. And so I guess these are the tips I've learned over the last few months. So I'm not, despite appearances, a natural extrovert. I find the concept of networking excruciatingly painful. I find small talk just cringeworthy. So there's the couple of tips that I've learned. So just like Faye said, it's not a great idea to go with a friend. However, what you can do is go with a friend and promise each other that you will not sit together. You sit at opposite sides of the room, and you have to talk to 2 other people before you can then hang out together and leave together. So that is a really nice tip. I've done that with a very good friend of mine, and we've kind of looked at each other. Have you done your 2 yet? And no. And it forces you, but then it also means you've got an exit strategy, because actually sometimes it's also really uncomfortable leaving these events sometime as well. Leaving can be as uncomfortable as being there. You don't want to be the first, but you don't want to be the last, you know. You don't want to look like it was a completely wasted event. So having somebody to leave with is quite nice. The other thing I do, and often my best networking has not even been at networking events, get your head out of your phone and read a book, right? I don't even know, what do I have in my bag today? But I can guarantee you I've got a book. Here we go. I have a book. What is it? Ikigai. Yes. So, you know, be reading an interesting book. Like we were talking about earlier, be an interesting person. You know, if Faye comes up to me and says, "Hi, I'm Faye, who are you?" And I go, "Oh, I'm Emily." You know, it's pathetic, right? You know, and it always gives you something to talk about. Oh, random, but have you by any chance read this book? I'm reading it at the moment. I think it's really fabulous, you know. So having something interesting to talk about. I've spoken to so many people in airports, on airplanes, in coffee shops, just sat randomly in a shopping center where I've got, you know, an hour between meetings, and I, you know, find somewhere quiet to read my book, and people will come up and talk to you. You will never find somebody come up and speak to you if you've got your head in your phone. It just won't happen. So read a book, read a magazine, read a newspaper article, whatever it is, but please don't read them on e-readers or on your mobile phone. It is just the blocker of all social interaction. Like I say, have something interesting to talk about. If you are going to go to a networking event, you know, go to networking events that you're genuinely interested in, or the type of people that you want to meet will be genuinely interested in. Right. So, and there's nothing wrong with saying, you know, I've come to this event on an EMBA because it was a free opportunity to meet other people that might be interested in executive education, or I've come to this event on entrepreneurship because I'm currently unemployed, and it might actually be quite interesting to meet somebody who's starting their own business who I could potentially, you know, find employment with. So, you know, knowing why you're there so that you can answer that question, like Faye said, you know, "Hi, I'm Faye." I'm not, I'm Emily. But, you know, "Hi, I'm Emily. What brought you to this event?" Have an answer, right? There's nothing worse than having nothing to say, you know. And even just having some basic stock questions of, "Oh, so do you work near here?" You know, the other thing I would say is also be careful what you ask people. So at networking events, so being Angmo, and obviously not from Singapore originally, the worst question I get asked is, "Oh, so what does your husband do that brought you to Singapore?" And, you know, to me, that's the death of any potential relationship with somebody that wants to network with me. The other thing I struggle with at networking is people talking to you but looking over your shoulder for somebody more interesting to speak to. I find it just the rudest networking etiquette. So, you know, be genuinely interested in the person that you're speaking to. People remember that. People will remember that you gave them eye contact. People will remember that you were genuine, you know, and approachable. So this is why I changed my networking approach to, rather than how can this person help me? Do I want to talk to them? Because then as soon as you'll find out they're not actually that interesting and they can't potentially help you with your job search, you're looking for the next person to speak to. So instead think, well, how can I be useful to this person? They may be more senior to you. They may not have they may not have job seeking at the moment, but do they potentially have an interest in a sport that somebody else and you can connect them? Have they only just arrived in Singapore and perhaps you can introduce them to somebody or tell them about a great restaurant? Do they really love the idea of going dragon boat racing, and you can potentially introduce them to somebody? But there's so many ways that you can help people that's not necessarily just about job searching. And if you're a genuinely caring person, people will remember you far more than if you were the job seeker just looking for a job lead.
Right.
And it is difficult when you're job searching, and maybe you're getting a little bit worried about money, and you're getting a little bit worried that you've not hit your metrics that week. It is really difficult, but just remember, from the other person's point of view, they don't want to be used. They don't want to be a tool for you. They want to have a genuine connection with you.
I noticed because the past two questions that I've asked both of you were around how we should approach our job search, and I noticed it really focused more on the networking and really getting yourself out there, but not too much about actually applying for jobs. Or was that intentional, or was that
No, not at all. Yeah, I mean, I guess there is that practical element to it.
Yeah.
I think if from my side, obviously, I see a lot of CVs on a daily basis. I think, again, it goes back to really, in my opinion, if to successfully apply, I think, again, it's about having that ownership of it being your job search. So taking the time on your CV, making sure there are no spelling mistakes, making sure the grammar is correct, getting someone else to proofread it for you, those basic things. And then when you are ready to start making those applications, to begin with, make sure you don't have to, it's a balancing act. When you see a job, a lot of people, and there's been a lot of research on this, some people will read it and think, oh, I don't fit all of the criteria, I shouldn't apply, even though they'd be a perfectly suitable candidate. Okay. On the other extreme, you have people that have no experience whatsoever but think, I'll just give it a try.
Yeah.
I would say, for your own personal brand, remember there are people reading these applications. Make sure the job is relevant. Make sure that you fit not all the criteria, but enough of the criteria to be able to do the job.
Right.
I think you'll find much more response rate that way. I think there are many ways you can connect on LinkedIn. I know a lot of candidates do tell me that when they apply directly to jobs on LinkedIn, they often don't hear anything back. And I think that it can feel like you're sending your CV into a bit of a black hole, never to be heard or seen of again. So, some of the things I would say is it is still worth applying for those jobs, because not all companies work with recruitment agencies. But I would say don't let that only be your only method of application, because I think it can become a little bit soul destroying never to receive a response. Right. So I think, that's where agencies can be a big help, because we already have those relationships and we can get your CV in front of the right people. So definitely finding, it doesn't have to be a lot, maybe 2 or 3 agents that you connect with and that you like as a person. I think that's really important, right, that you have a natural rapport with, to represent you and to keep you informed about those jobs in the market. I think the other way as well, and I think that's why perhaps we both focus more on the networking piece, is that often it's about, don't be afraid to send your CV. Ask to someone if you can send them your CV that of that network, or looking and saying, oh, I see this company's advertising, and the HR director and you're connected. I had a friend do that a while ago, and he was like, is it just someone you're connected with, or do you actually know them? Right. And I think that was a really good question to ask, because, if you do really know them, you can say, oh, yeah, I know Emily really well. Yeah, sure, happily I'll introduce your CV. You're not asking people to guarantee you an interview. You're just asking if they'd be open to do that for you. Right. So I think that could be, that would be, I guess, some of the suggestions I would give. And then just, and I think just being prepared perhaps not to hear back. which is hard to say.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people, there used to be a time when, certainly in my recruitment career, where everybody expected to get some sort of feedback. I think people actually have changed their expectations now, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily expect to hear that, but some people still are shocked when they don't hear anything back. So I think have that as, you know what, I'm probably not going to hear back, or you might get an automated email, but don't take that personally. It's just the volume of applicants that,
Right.
you know, whether it's a recruitment agent or whether it's an in-house recruiter, that they have to screen. It's almost come to the point now it's impossible to reply to every person, because you'd never have time to read the CVs that come in through the door.
Right.
So I think just mentally maybe being prepared for that it's not, again, it's not about you.
Right.
It may just be that you weren't the right fit for this role, and also understanding that with some roles the role might have already closed and the ad hasn't been taken down yet. The role, they might already have a candidate at final, so they're not seeing any applications. I think for me, to get the most out of LinkedIn, I guess the real practical things you can do is setting up the alerts on LinkedIn. So you can set up alerts to tell you about specific jobs as soon as they come up. I think if you look at a job and there've been 200 applicants and it's been open for a month, maybe save your time.
Right.
And move on to a role where, you know, it's been open 2 days, or, you know, you've heard about it in the first 24 hours. That would, you know, just be logical about it and look at it from a, you know, how can I get my CV in front of someone, and what's the best way to go about that?
I've actually also seen some people who send their CVs through LinkedIn or through other job portals, and then they also try and follow up with the person who's recruiting for that job. Is that a professional way to do it, or is there what's the line to thread there? Because it can be a bit overwhelming for the person receiving.
Yeah, and I think again it's a balancing act. I think absolutely, if you've put an application in and you do some people put their names on there, I think to send a polite message through LinkedIn is absolutely fine. I think when people do get a bit carried away is they'll reply through LinkedIn, through another job portal, they'll send a direct email, they'll then, you know, contact one of your colleagues to get a recommendation. I think I always am a big believer of treat people how you would like to be treated, and sort of putting yourself in those shoes. And I think it can come across a little unprofessional if you're bombarding this one person through every network. It can be quite damaging to your application.
Right.
So I think, you know, sending an application and following up with a polite email or an in-mail on LinkedIn is fine, or a phone call if you're privy to that information. I never have a problem if someone calls me to ask about a job. I may have to say to them, sorry, look, I haven't got your CV yet, but, you know, we'll let you know if you're successful. But don't be afraid to do that and have that initial conversation. But I think you have to draw the line, because otherwise it becomes stalkerish almost.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's never going to be a good first impression to make.
Yeah, I agree. And isn't it that it's the cardinal sin for any recruitment agent that if you're applying for a role through the recruiter, never go directly to the company? That is like the ultimate, it's the ultimate slap in the face for the recruiter. No, I you know, I love the question, and I love the fact as well, Nick, that you called us out on the fact that we're focusing so much on networking. I think because so many opportunities come through network, you know, they're the people that know what's going on in industries. They know when a new branch of an office is opening, you know, they know who's about to get fired or relocated, you know, they know all of this stuff. So many opportunities come through there. But obviously there are other avenues. LinkedIn is obviously one of them, and depending on what level that, you know, the kind of role that you're interested in, it's also the mycareerfuture.sg portal, which is the new job bank. And the nice thing about, you know, going directly on there rather than on LinkedIn, etc., is that especially if you're a foreigner, right, like, you know, like myself, everybody's the jobs that a foreigner is going to be hired onto has to be advertised on there. So it means that they're genuine positions, right? That people, you know, they're not just, sorry, Faye, it does happen, but it's not just recruiters trying to generate leads of candidates. You know, there are a lot of fake ads on there. I genuinely believe that, you know, companies do post fake ads. You know, and like Faye says, you know, sometimes jobs get auto posted. I saw a job recently, and I was having a look at it. I was like, grief, the person that stayed in that applied to that role didn't stay in it very long, because I remember seeing it 6 months ago, and I found out from the recruiter that actually it's just auto reposted for the last 6 months, and they've been getting bombarded by applications, but somebody's forgot to turn the auto post off. So,
Okay.
there's a few things when you are applying for jobs as well. A lot of companies now are using AI to read documents. Do not be under any misconception that a human is going to be reading your CV. That is not always the case. And so, if the job description that you're applying for has certain keywords or certain criteria, take the 5 minutes that it takes to do a tailored CV, because your CV will then get picked up by the AI. Now, one of the things I've done with my CV is I've got 3 or 4 different versions, right? So I've got a version that is a generalist role, a version that's more of a consultative role, a version that focus more on learning and development or talent, and one that's kind of more on the mergers and acquisitions and the project side. So it means that the same CV, it just means I'm marketing myself differently. All the CV is a marketing tool, and just as a company has the same razor, but they brand it slightly differently depending on the target audience. That's all you're doing with a CV. So make sure you've got your different versions and use the correct one with the correct buzzwords and keyword searches that the AI might pick up on. You also quite often, the first round of screening could actually be with a very junior person, a junior administrator who doesn't understand the technicalities of your role. So make it really easy for them, because generally recruiters will be told, I'm looking for somebody with this qualification, this number of years experience, that's been in this role for X amount of time with these type of companies. So spell it out.
Right.
The first line on your CV should be, I am a ex-professional with however many years experience in the whatever industry, because then this poor person that's having to read 500 CVs is going to know whether you're the right candidate or not. Making sure that your education is really visible. If you've got a Bachelor of Science, or you've got an MA, or you've got a diploma in a particular topic, making sure that as well is in a little box right at the beginning of your CV. Don't hide your current educational and qualifications right at the bottom in the education section, because people often don't get to the second page. So that's an important tip as well. And generally when you're recruiting, yes, if you see a role that's advertised on LinkedIn or My Career Future or any of the other job portals, if you know somebody that works for that organization, quite often companies have refer a friend schemes. As a HR person, I love it when I get refer a friend, because not only does it mean that the employees in my organization are happy enough working there that they're prepared to refer their friends for a job, but it means, sorry, Faye, I'm not paying recruitment agency fees. I'm not having to screen 200 CVs. I would always go with a refer a friend. And I think as well, going back to the question of how you prepare yourself, I think, be prepared to not get any response, and for me, just so that I'm not replying to jobs multiple times, or I can keep track if a job is reposted incorrectly on LinkedIn, I do write down the company name of all the jobs that I'm applying for, because I don't want to look like an idiot that goes through 2 agencies or contacts somebody directly, or applies for a job that's 6 months old. So I do keep a list, but I don't track everything, and I don't expect a response for everything. I literally just do that so I don't make any errors of communication. So I think, they would be my practical tips of looking for a job.
I also want to talk about, and both of you have, I guess I kind of know what you guys are going to say already, but
you never know.
When it comes to okay, we'll see. But when it comes to handling rejection, how do we pick ourselves up from it, because it's one or two is not so bad, right? But when you get a few, how do we, number one, you know, try to not take it personally, and number two, learn how to figure out what's constructive feedback and what is just subjective to the company that you applied to.
Yeah, obviously, as part of my job, I have to give people bad news. Good news as well, but bad news. And I think, as far as to your first point with regards to how to handle that, I think always keeping in mind again, and it goes back to what I said earlier about, if you feel that, I think you've prepared yourself, if you've done all of the practical things that we've discussed, and if you've gone to the interview and you've prepared for that, and sometimes an interview will go well and sometimes it won't, and sometimes it can just be about personality. It doesn't necessarily mean that anyone's done anything wrong, and again, I think just preparing yourself that you can, in my view, look in the mirror and feel like you gave the best conduct of yourself and you did the best you could, because that's all that anyone's really asking. No one is an expert interviewer, no one. Everyone gets nervous, and I think as long as you're polite and you're authentic, and you're prepared and you've looked at the company website, you've done your research, you've read the job description, you've got questions prepared in advance. I think when you get that call, and if it is bad news, be open to hearing why. Some of the hard things for me to have to say are things like, well, they asked you what you knew about the company, and you despite me having sent you that information before the interview, you hadn't read it. And that's sometimes harder because it is something where you kind of like, well, that was down to you again owning your job search. You had all of the information there. I think, and then other times it can just be down to a matter of, personality and culture fit, and that's sometimes harder because it's hard to give people constructive feedback when your client's saying, well, it's just not, people aren't quite the right fit, and no matter how many questions we ask, it can be quite subjective,
right?
And that can be harder. So again, not taking that too personally. I think also listening to whoever's giving you the feedback, whether that's an internal recruiter or whether that's an agency recruiter, and actually listening and taking that on board. I think, we can all improve, we can all get better, and not being defensive, understanding that the person giving you this news, don't shoot the messenger. Right. They're trying to give you the best advice, and, I've had to give some difficult feedback over the years, but I've always found, preempting, look, I'm just going to share this with you and tell you exactly how it was told to me. I wasn't in the interview, so I can't comment. You may feel differently, but I felt it was important to share this with you for your job search. And I think that's a hard conversation to have, and none of us like having hard conversations, and none of us like hearing those things either. But I think listening and taking that on board, and even if it is as simple, okay, thank you very much, I'll speak to you soon, and then maybe going away and having a moment to yourself about that and thinking, well, this is unfair, but then trying to really think about what you've been told, and take that on board. And again, just being kind to yourself, realizing that not every job is going to be the right fit for you. You're not going to pass every interview, and just taking that on board. And as long as you're prepared and you've gone into that interview with the right attitude, move on, and you move on to the next thing, and take your learnings with you, I think would be what I'd say. And none of that is easy. But just again, remember that you're not alone. Everyone's going through this. And there'll always be people that can talk to you about their worst interview experiences. And hopefully, you can, I wouldn't say necessarily laugh about it, but you can appreciate it for what it was later on.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes laugh if, I had a friend who fell off the chair in an interview and she was mortified. And, we laugh about it now. Yeah. At the time, maybe not. But, it's a simple example.
Right.
Yeah, I think, sometimes we need to get rejection into perspective, because all a rejection is a sales process where the response was no thank you, right? And honestly, especially in Singapore, we as consumers, we do this every day. We walk past stores and there's that poor person that's handing out the freebies, desperately trying to get you into the store. You know, if you're in a sales role, you understand what that rejection feels like.
Absolutely.
You know, as job searchers, you look at a job description that an organization may have posted and you decide not to apply. You rejected that job. You know, quite often, you know, if you're in a fortunate position where you go for a speculative interview, maybe if you're not really searching, you may turn it down. A recruiter may call you and you go, do you know what, actually, thank you very much, it's not for me. So get rejection into perspective. All rejection is a no thank you, right? So it can feel very, very personal, but I think not having all your eggs in one basket helps. You know, don't pin all your hopes on that one job. You know, you should always have a plan that tomorrow there's another meeting, there's another coffee, there's another networking event. So don't put all your hopes on one conversation with one job. That's the first thing I would say. I think then, you know, quite often the person giving you the news of the rejection, if we're going to call it a rejection, is actually not the person that has made the decision. So either it's a HR person or it's a recruiter or it's some poor administrator who has to call you and say, you know, thank you very much for coming for an interview, but, you know, we're not taking you forward in the process. Ask them, by all means, for any constructive feedback to help you with your job search. If they don't have any, you could say, look, I am actively job searching. It would be really useful if you could get me some you know, constructive feedback for me to take away with me, because then at least you're coming away with something. You're not coming away with a no thank you. You're coming away with something. So by all means, ask them to go away and come back to you. Some people don't necessarily feel comfortable doing that over the phone. So perhaps you could just say, look, would it be possible to get an email with some pointers? Some people may not feel comfortable with an email, so may prefer doing a phone call. Right. So, you know, test your audience as well. You know, in terms of being rejected, it's really hard. I don't even like the term. I think we need to just change it. Let's not use the term rejection anymore. Let's just say, when you receive a no thank you, when you receive a no thank you, you know, it's also like, you know, Faye was saying, all job interviews are a two-way process. And, you know, that awful feedback that we sometimes get with, oh, culture fit wasn't quite right. Do you know what? Quite often they've done you a favor, because if it's not the right culture fit, if you don't have the right skills, if you're not at the right level, if you're too senior, if you're too junior, if you don't have the right qualifications, the job was going to be bloody miserable. Am I allowed to swear on a podcast? I don't know. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, that's good. Fine, yeah. do we have to put a disclaimer at the top? Sorry.
Don't worry about it. It's up to us.
So, you know, I just think you need to put it all into perspective and, you know, just make sure you've got another egg in another basket, and that, you know, it's not the be all and end all.
Right. Are we allowed to, if they give us a rejection or a no thank you on over the phone and they explain why and you disagree, is there a way to disagree and to have another opportunity, or is that deal over already?
I would say probably not.
Yeah.
I would say it's about taking it with grace.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And walking away from that. But honestly, I couldn't agree more with what Emily said about, you know, it's not the one for you.
Right.
If it, you know, if you're receiving that, it's not the one for you. I often find as well, when you're able to do that with grace, and, you know, and like you say, keeping, you know, a clear mind about what is actually happening and you know, not taking it too personally, you may find a company might reapproach you for a different role.
Right.
So it's about not burning bridges. It's about being polite, being graceful. Thank you very much. Even if inside you're raging or you're really upset, then you put the phone away and go and have a scream and shout or a cry, or whichever way makes you feel better, or go and hit the treadmill and, you know, do a run. So I think it's really about just, I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think taking it gracefully, you never know what that might lead to, or you never know, you know, often I know a lot of people that, you know, for example, in HR, my contacts, they all know each other, and they might actually be like, well, actually, I interviewed to say she's not right for us for X and Y, but you know what? She's got a good skill set. Maybe you should consider her. And you have to remember that people talk.
Right.
So I think to go back once somebody said that, no, thank you, to try and push that further at that point definitely is not right.
Yeah, I've actually done that a lot. So as a HR person, quite often within the HR community, I know people hiring systems engineers, or I know people hiring a PA, and I've done it a lot. That if there's been an absolutely amazing person, maybe they were just pipped to the post, or maybe we had an internal candidate. I have actively handed them to another, never a competitor, but to another company of somebody that I know is searching. I've actually made a lot of connections on, LinkedIn. I've helped people. I've invited people to events just through having interviewed them at some stage in a process, and built a relationship with them because they were an interesting, nice, friendly, gracious, person. And I've even been in interview processes where people have turned around and said to me, do you know what, this role isn't right for you, however, I'm going to introduce you to this other person, and it's going to be fabulous. So this is why, even if the role isn't for you, even if you do get a no thank you, just be gracious. Even send a thank you note. The number of people that I get a really lovely maybe email or LinkedIn connection note from, just saying, look, it was really great to interview with you. Really sorry that the role didn't, pan out, but I'd love to be connected with you on LinkedIn in case there's a future opportunity, or so I can follow you on LinkedIn. I think that's fabulous, because it means that that's one more person in my network that I can perhaps reach out to when I've got another open vacancy, or just generally for events or any meeting. It's just another person in your network. So treat people how you'd like to be treated.
Right.
And at some stage in your career, yes, you may be a job seeker, but at some other stage you're going to be a hiring manager, or you're going to be that person that's handing out the freebies outside of a shop in Suntec City, and trying to get people into your store, and you're going to be rejected, and you're also going to be on the other side of it doing the rejecting. So be professional, and again, give what you'd like to receive one day.
Final question, I guess. What would you tell yourself? I mean, you as experienced HR professionals, what would you tell yourself if you had just, lost your job and you're going back out in the job market? Knowing what you know now, what would you advise yourself to give yourself that level of motivation and encouragement?
So I think for myself, because I've been through this a number of times, I think, the first thing is not taking it personally. The second thing is making sure you're prepared, being a genuinely interesting person and having stuff to talk about other than work. Even just, if you're going to be made redundant, and if you're going to be job searching, having a charity that you like, or having events, or a project that you're working on, or just volunteering at your kid's school, whatever it is, that makes you a more rounded, holistic individual. Because, ultimately our jobs, yes, there are a vast proportion of the hours are waking hours, but they're not the be all and end all.
Right.
And, having other interesting stuff in your life, having your tribe of friends that will pick you up when you're having a bad day, that will accept your, random text messages and send you memes, to cheer you up and keep you motivated on your job search. I think so. The learnings I've taken with me through this process that maybe I would give to myself maybe 6 months ago are: don't be ashamed, be really open about the fact that you're job searching, and try and be clear about what you want. It's okay to be open-minded and opportunistic, but, it's easy to give myself this advice, but I don't do it. But, knowing what it is that you want to do, so that when people go, oh, interesting, you're looking for a job, what are you looking for? If you then sit there going, don't really know, that's not the best way to use your network. So having an elevator pitch, I think as well, would be another learning for myself. The number of people that I have met that have just said, oh, great, you know, who are you? What are you looking for? You know, whether it's a recruiter, whether it's a CEO, whether it's at a networking event, whether it's a startup founder, you know, being able to answer the question eloquently, you know, is really, really important. And I think it took me quite a while to realize how important it was to have an elevator pitch and be ready and be open and transparent about my job search, both my job search and my consultancy work. You know, they're both the same, right? It's both a sales pitch,
Right.
and I'm marketing myself either as a, you know, a HR consultant, as a mentor, as a coach, as a event speaker, and as a potential, you know, job candidate. So I have a number of ways in which I'm marketing myself to the outside world, and you know, you need to have that slick. You need to know your stuff.
My advice, I'd say, would be, again, remember, this isn't about you. The decision was made by someone else. This is unfortunately what we're seeing more and more in the current economic climate. I'd say the other thing is, as I said before, be kind to yourself. You know, again, you need to look after yourself, and, you know, you need to be your own biggest cheerleader. And I think also, finally, and this is probably easier said than done, but I have seen people do it, is see it as an opportunity. See it as, you know what, okay, well, this has happened, and, you know, maybe I'm shocked, maybe I'm upset, but this is an opportunity to move on to something new. And the amount of people I meet, obviously, that have been through this, and then I see them come out of the other side, and it is lovely to see, and they find a great role, and, you know, it's turns out, and, you know, I wouldn't recommend saying this to someone on day one of their job search, but it turns out to have been the best thing that could have happened to them, because it forced them to go out into the market when they were probably quite comfortable where they were, and they probably would have settled for a job they were not really passionate about, but was doing, and would have stayed there for the comfort. And it actually forces you to go out there into the market. And I've seen so many people elevate their career as a result of something like this happening, because it has forced them out of their comfort zone. It's forced them to get back out into the market, a market which might have changed hugely since they first looked for a job.
Right.
I guess so. Those would be my three things. Last one may be easier said than done at the earlier stages. But
I think in general, the best advice are always easier said than done, but they're always timeless, right? You know, they're the most effective, but we just, during that time, we're like, no, but give me something more practical. Yeah, but yeah, that was it. I never know how to end these podcasts, so forgive me for that. But Faye, Emily, thank you so much for being part of this, and we hope our listeners were able to get a lot of valuable insights from that. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.